This is the Marxists at the Movies podcast.
Scene opens, white lights dim down low. The cinema whispers where truths can grow. From shadows deep and screens ignite, the proletariat comes alive tonight. Tonight, Marxists at the movies, bright and raw, breaking through the reels to rewrite the law. Workers of the world in every frame, changing the credits, rewriting the name.
Welcome to Marxists at the Movies, the podcast that critiques film like it's gentrifying our neighborhood, loudly, bitterly, and with receipts. I'm Edward Michael Francis.
And I'm Edward Michael Francis. Exactly the same in everything, except my eyeliner game is stronger.
Today we're dissecting two films that should have been allies, but ended up tracing very different futures for queer representation.
What's that?
The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, and To Wong Foo, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar.
An unnerving amount of commas in those titles.
On the surface, they're similar. A trio of drag queens on a transformative road trip, confronting rural bigotry.
Quite right.
But dial into their edges, and you see two opposing visions of queer life. And that difference centers on the question, who was the audience?
Precisely.
Priscilla targeted queers with complexity. Dirty, sharp, wounded. To Wong Foo targeted mainstream white heteronormativity by scrubbing out the mess, the sex, the danger, and the trans content.
Let's not mince words. To Wong Foo is queerness with the corners filed off, like a drag queen who's forgotten how to read. The library is not open.
And of course, before we go any further, spoiler warning folks, we will be discussing full plot details of both movies.
I mean, seriously, if you're 2LGBTQIA+ and you haven't seen both of these movies, turn in your gay card to the nearest recruiter now.
My essay, Two Roads, Two Visions, opens in 1995 inside a multiplex at Gurney Mills Mall.
Ooh, nice.
Picture this.
I'm picturing.
Two queer teens from suburban nowhere. Me and my friend Leslie.
Yay, Leslie!
To Wong Foo cracked something open in the world.
Exactly.
Just enough for us to believe it might be safe to breathe. The full article is available on our Patreon at patreon.com/cinemarchmedia. But we'll get to more on that later.
This movie was a queer lifeline, yes, but lifelines often sting.
Exactly. We were desperate, starved for reflection on screen, but almost immediately, two truths clapped together.
What were they?
This is me, and this is not all of me. There was no nudity, no grit, no voices insisting we deserve our mess and our rights.
Instead, three men forever locked in drag like an Instagram filter that won't turn off.
Meanwhile, Priscilla was already living in its contradictions. Transness named, sex work addressed, characters hurting, healing, infuriating one another.
Right?
Bernadette's deadpan, I am a woman, was a direct confrontation with erasure.
Oh, and don't forget the R rating. That meant real sex, real stakes, no pandering. Meanwhile, To Wong Foo walked in with a PG-13 badge like a hall pass from queer radicalism.
So today, we'll take apart casting decisions, script changes, performance choices, audiences, and industry comfort zones.
It's about time.
We'll trace how Priscilla and To Wong Foo taught divergent lessons about queer possibility.
Girl, if you're listening because you think queer cinema is just camp and ball gowns, this episode is going to pull the wig off that illusion and show you the roots.
And if you came for the nostalgia,
get ready.
Oh, yeah?
We'll honor what these films did for us.
Nice.
But also demolish the parts that hurt us.
Ready when you are.
Let's f up some Hollywood narratives. Let's talk about the films themselves.
Okay.
Starting with The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert.
Love it.
It dropped in 1994 and immediately became a global queer touchstone. Part drag fantasy, part desert survival story. And all of that wrapped in Tula, sequins, and actual road dust. Directed by Stephen Elliott, the film follows two drag queens played by Hugo Weaving and Guy Pearce, and a trans woman played by Terrence Stamp.
Brilliant turn.
As they road trip across the Australian outback in a beat-up tour bus named Priscilla.
Perfect.
It's funny, it's raw, and it doesn't flinch from showing how brutal rural homophobia can be.
Yeah, it's not just feathers and ABBA. There's blood under the glitter.
The movie premiered at Cannes and got a full standing ovation. It won the Oscar for Best Costume Design, which, no surprise, because those outfits were basically character arcs.
Well deserved.
The flip-flop dress alone could have won its own Golden Globe.
Fun fact,
That silver stiletto on top of the bus, that thing had to be bolted down with steel. It was a hazard and a metaphor. Filming was rough. They were in the middle of nowhere. Dust storms, 100-degree heat, equipment breaking down, and somehow, in all of that, you've got Terrence Stamp giving this devastatingly restrained performance as Bernadette.
which, by the way, was one of the first major trans characters played seriously on film. Not perfectly, but seriously.
And over time, Priscilla didn't just become a cult classic. It got inducted into Australia's National Film Registry.
That's awesome.
It's been adapted into a stage musical, parodied endlessly, and yet still stands out for its mix of camp and pain.
It's messy, heartfelt, and oddly sacred. A little bus that could, with a whole lot of gay on board. Hey, wasn't that a song? Got a whole lot of gay.
Priscilla hits the world like a glitter bomb with a dark core.
That's an image.
Fun, fierce, and brutally honest. But just 1 year later, America said,
Hold up.
wait, we want one too, and gave us To Wong Foo, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar.
Because what is queerness if not repackaged and focused group for Peoria palatability?
This was Hollywood's answer to Priscilla. Bigger stars, bigger budget, but also, let's be honest,
and we always are.
bigger compromises. Directed by Beeban Kidron and written by Douglas Carter Bean, To Wong Foo came out in 1995 with a cast that screamed, "Don't worry, Middle America, we got Patrick Swayze."
Swayze, Snipes, Leguizamo, like you've never seen them. This was the ad campaign.
It was made during a time when Hollywood was still terrified of alienating audiences with anything too explicitly queer. So this movie walks a tightrope,
What tightrope?
trying to honor drag culture while avoiding any direct mention of queerness, gender identity, or sexuality.
It's like watching a pride parade that got rerouted through a church potluck.
One of the film's most revealing choices is that Vida, Noxima, and Chi-Chi never step out of drag.
Oh, boy.
Not once. Not when they're alone, not when they're exhausted,
Yep.
not even when it would make narrative or emotional sense.
Exactly.
And that's not just a stylistic quirk.
What else is it?
It's a sign of studio panic. By refusing to show the queen's masculine selves, the film avoids confronting gender fluidity altogether.
Of course.
The message is clear. This is a performance for you, not who they are.
Don't be silly. Drag queens don't get to take their wigs off. I mean, it was allowed in white chicks, but not here.
In real queer life, drag isn't a mask you glue on and forget about. It's a navigation.
a back and forth between selves,
Preach!
shaped by safety, survival, identity, and performance. But To Wong Foo flattens that reality into eternal showtime. It strips away the private from the public and replaces it with fantasy. And the casting doubles down on that safety net. Patrick Swayze, Wesley Snipes, John Leguizamo, each known for aggressively masculine roles.
Boys.
Their personas reassured audiences this wasn't real queerness, just actors dressing up. No threat, no risk.
Don't worry, folks. Dirty Dancing didn't turn your son gay.
Compare that to Priscilla, which cast theater-trained actors like Hugo Weaving and Guy Pearce, performers who weren't culturally coded as macho icons. That gave their portrayals a kind of fluidity that felt authentic rather than performative.
Wesley Snipes really said, "Watch me serve realness," then clocked out to go kill vampires.
And ironically, of the three To Wong Foo leads, Snipes is the one who actually pulls it off.
Quite right.
As Noxeema Jackson, he doesn't just wear drag. He channels a fully inhabited character. There's this groundedness to her, a weariness, a ferocity.
Oh, agreed.
She's not comic relief or a walking after school special.
Nope.
She's a queen with a backstory we never hear but still feel. Snipes doesn't camp it up. He lets her breathe.
Blade could never. Unless Blade had a secret pageant past.
And while Noxeema manages to break through, the rest of the film plays like a tightly controlled experiment.
How so?
Roger Ebert called it probably the first movie about drag queens to be rated PG-13.
R.I.P. Roger.
And that rating tells you everything. Sex? Gone. Sweat? Gone. Any mention of queerness that might complicate a straight viewer's comfort? Redacted.
Oof.
It's the drag queen starter pack for suburban parents.
Not a single epithet hurled, not a kiss exchanged. But Lord knows we got the decorating montage.
Meanwhile, Priscilla earned its R rating with scenes of sex work, physical assault, casual cruelty, and an openly trans character. That's a world away from To Wong Foo's sanitized fantasy.
Correct.
Where being queer means you have makeover parties and save a woman from her husband
Wah, wah.
without ever sweating through your foundation.
Imagine a world where queers exist and no one has sex or trauma. Hallmark presents Pride Month.
We'll return right after this.
Each flickers with a revolutionary beam. The heroes rise from the factory floor, challenging the scripts and demanding more.
The director later described To Wong Foo as part of a really interesting gender moment, made in the shadow of the AIDS crisis and steeped in 90s homophobia.
Yay.
That context matters, but so does the fact that the marketing for this movie never once used the word gay, transgender, or queer. It was a road trip comedy with costumes. That's how they sold it.
Working title, Ladies' Night, but with testicles.
That wasn't just marketing, it was strategy. The studio reportedly passed on Robin Williams for being too unattractive.
Nice look, folks.
They needed drag queens who could pass as conventionally beautiful cis women, because, God forbid, drag actually challenged gender norms.
No, none of that.
That's not representation, that's compliance.
The studio note said, more eyeliner, less queerness.
Precisely. What we get isn't drag at all. We get tourism. These queens aren't radical.
Nope.
They're diplomats.
Exactly.
Their job is to show up in this small town and teach that even a drag queen can be kind.
Nice and obvious.
They don't fight. They don't they don't fail. They sparkle. And sparkle is safe.
It's giving gay best friend energy, but feature length.
And the film's most glaring absence is its refusal to engage with transgender identity directly.
Trans? What's that?
Well, Priscilla at least attempted to distinguish between drag performance and trans identity, however imperfectly. To Wong Foo collapsed all gender variants into drag queen.
Sheesh.
Without exploring what that meant for different characters.
Chichi Rodriguez, the youngest and most vulnerable queen, could have been a vehicle for exploring trans youth, the economics of transition, or the difference between performance and identity.
Instead, she remains a comic relief character whose gender is never examined beyond the surface level.
Agreed.
This erasure wasn't accidental, it was commercial. Trans narratives in 1995 were deemed unmarketable.
Yep.
Too complex for mainstream audiences already struggling with the concept of drag.
Missed opportunities everywhere you look.
Before we dive into the legacy of these two films, let's acknowledge our revolutionary feline correspondent, Myron Rosander Francis.
Yay, Myron!
Who makes regular appearances on our Patreon content and has strong opinions about both cinematography and treat distribution.
That cat's film tastes are unmatched.
Speaking of Patreon, for just $6 a month, you get early access to all of our articles, including deep dives. For just $10, in addition to all the written materials, you get early podcast access to both Marxists at the Movies and The Marching Revolution.
Wow.
That's just 2 shows for the price of 1.
Now that's a revolutionary bargain.
So anyway, the film's legacy is paradoxical.
Why is that?
It opened doors by proving queer content could be commercially viable, paving the way for more authentic representations.
Right.
Yet it also established patterns of sanitization and respectability politics that queer media still struggles against today.
Say it again for the folks in the back.
It saved lives by offering representation to queer youth starving for visibility, while simultaneously betraying those same youth by refusing to show them the fullness of their possibilities.
To Wong Foo gave me a lifeline in Gurney, but it also stole a bolder story.
The trans narrative buried in its potential could have been a lifeline for someone else.
Right.
Someone who needed to see that gender doesn't always come off with the makeup. That femininity can be lived truth rather than performance.
What else?
And that queens can be more than magical helpers in straight people's stories.
Meanwhile, Priscilla aged like fine wine because it wasn't afraid to be messy.
Exactly. Priscilla's unapologetic messiness let it age into a cult classic, flaws and all.
It had the last laugh.
Its willingness to show queerness as complex, contradictory, and sometimes ugly gave it staying power that To Wong Foo's respectability couldn't match.
The real tragedy of To Wong Foo isn't what it was, but what it prevented other films from being.
By succeeding so dramatically with its sanitized approach, it proved to Hollywood that queer stories only worked when they prioritized straight comfort over queer authenticity.
We're still living in that shadow.
The template it established, charismatic queer characters who exist to serve heteronormative narratives, dominated 2LGBTQIA plus representation for decades.
But maybe that's not entirely fair. In 1995, as AIDS still decimated queer communities and homophobia was culturally sanctioned, perhaps any visibility was radical.
Perhaps 3 major movie stars in drag, no matter how sanitized, was a victory worth celebrating.
The representation dilemma. Crumbs versus the full meal.
The question for this Pride Month isn't whether To Wong Foo was perfect. It clearly wasn't.
Correct.
The question is whether we've learned from its limitations.
That's the question.
Are we still making queer content designed primarily to educate straight audiences? Or have we moved beyond respectability politics towards more authentic representation?
These are issues we still face.
As we celebrate Pride 2025, 30 years after these films premiered, we're living through another pivotal moment for 2LGBTQIA plus representation.
Streaming platforms hunger for queer content. Trans actors are finally getting trans roles, and drag has exploded into mainstream consciousness through RuPaul's Drag Race.
Yet, we're also facing unprecedented legislative attacks on trans rights, book bans targeting 2LGBTQIA plus stories.
You suck!
And a cultural backlash that echoes the mid-90s moral panic.
Which path will we choose?
Exactly. Priscilla's messy authenticity that trusts audiences to handle complexity, or To Wong Foo's sanitized safety that prioritizes palatability over truth.
It's a dilemma.
The answer matters more than ever because the stakes for trans youth, for queer visibility, for the future of our stories,
Quite right.
have never been higher.
All right, the time has come for our beloved hammer and sickle rating for both films.
Best of times, worst of times, but make it gay.
Well, we certainly will make it gay right now. Holla!
To Wong Foo gets a 3.0.
Woohoo!
Beautiful gowns, heartfelt intentions, but that studio meddling knocked the heels right off.
And Priscilla gets a 4.5. Messy, loud, problematic in places, but unapologetically queer and politically sharp where it counts.
One wears its heart on its sleeve. The other spray painted on a broke down bus in the desert.
And honestly, both are more radical than whatever Ron DeSantis is banning this week.
Going back to that Gurney Theater in 1995, Leslie and I didn't have the language for these criticisms. We just knew we were seeing something like ourselves on screen for the first time, and that had to be enough.
Deep.
Today, it's not enough anymore, and maybe that's the film's greatest legacy.
Really is.
It taught us what representation could look like, even as it showed us everything it shouldn't be.
This Pride Month, as we march and celebrate and fight for our continued existence, we carry both films with us. Priscilla's radical honesty and To Wong Foo's flawed but necessary visibility. The tension between them still defines our struggle. How do we tell authentic queer stories that don't sacrifice truth for acceptance?
The answer lies not in choosing one path over the other.
Of course not.
But in refusing to let anyone else choose for us. Our stories belong to us. Our drag belongs to us.
That's right.
Our truth, messy and complicated and beautifully queer, belongs to us.
Love it.
And this pride, more than ever, that's worth fighting for.
Abso-fucking-lutely.
That's all for today's episode of Marxists at the Movies. I'm Edward Michael Francis.
And I'm also Edward Michael Francis, but with better taste in jewelry.
Until next time, this is Marxists at the Movies.
White lights dim down low.
Thank you for listening to the Marxists at the Movies podcast. Don't forget to like and comment.
From shadows deep and screens ignite, the proletariat comes alive tonight. Marxists at the movies, bright and raw, breaking through the to rewrite the law. Workers of the world in every frame, changing the credits, rewriting the name. Popcorn power and the working class dream, each flickers with a revolutionary beam. The